Okay, so I'm Ben Brumfield.
I'm Sarah Brumfield.
And we are obviously a husband and wife digitalization shop. We are a couple of software engineers who do work mainly in the digital humanities, and that's led us into IIIF and other bits of library technology. The main thing that we do is run a crowdsourcing platform called FromThePage. So FromThePage is a open source tool that was first debuted at the very first DAT camp. So it's got deep roots in the digital humanities. So back in 2008 was the first time this was kind of shown, and was released open source shortly afterwards. It's been installed at the University of Texas Libraries, University of Leiden, University of Nebraska-Lincoln, Fordham University, New York Botanical Gardens. And we also host projects on our cloud service FromThePage.com. And that's for a subscription fee. That's also what we'll be using today because it's the easiest way to get up and running. So we're not gonna take you through installing on any servers or anything like that. We're gonna focus on the transcription platform and on the way that it brings IIIF images and metadata in, and then the ways that it exposes transcripts on the way out, also using IIIF.
So we've been involved with IIIF since 2015. This is actually a very recent screenshot of two different medieval witnesses to a medieval manuscript that were recently transcribed and pulled into Mirador 3 using our IIIF manifest, but the Mirador 3 application. And I am just kind of blown away by how pretty it all looks. You have a pretty manuscript, you have a pretty piece of software, you've got great transcriptions. But that's sort of an example of one of the many ways that we kind of interact with and touch IIIF. We've had IIIF funding to build out functionality, and from the page, we've taught, if you were here in the beginning, we were kind of chatting about different things. We've taught IIIF workshops for a number of universities and organizations. A couple of years ago, we co-wrote the implementation guide for IIIF. So we have been very involved in IIIF for quite a long time.
And we are fans, we're practically evangelists for IIIF because IIIF makes our lives easier. We run a transcription platform, and we want to spend our time helping people transcribe documents. We want to spend our time helping scholars edit texts. We really want to focus on ways, our goal is to have conversations with librarians and archivists and other scholars around their texts, around getting people to work on their texts, around finding volunteers, around textual encoding. But what we found from around 2010 until we discovered IIIF was that the majority of our conversations were about image uploads. Can we deal with zip files? What about PNGs? What about TIFFs? What about PDFs? And this was this huge hurdle for us. It was this enormous pain of getting images from library sites onto the transcription platform. And IIIF came along and was a dream come true. It really solved all this for us. And since then, since the coronavirus and the lockdown started 3 months ago, we've seen projects get started in 48 hours because of IIIF, right? It's just been so nice to be able to integrate with the rest of the world using these APIs.
Right. So let's get started. We promised a hands-on workshop, so we're going to do that. So we have a lot of slides, but we might kind of switch back and forth between that and a live web browser. But the first thing we're going to have you do is go to FromThePage.com, and please do that now.
And we're going to have you create an account that allows you to ingest material from IIIF manifests. So this is not an end user account. This is going to be what we call a project owner account. We have a way to do that automatically if you click this Start Free Trial button. You're not agreeing to anything with our commercial service or anything like that. We're just trying to get you up and running quickly.
So I think there's a hand raise or a thumbs up, or maybe there's some way you could indicate that you've created an account. I don't really know enough about Zoom. Glenn, you've been doing this for a week or two now. Do you have any suggestions for what we use for this?
People have been putting in the chat, kind of, if they're okay.
Okay. So we're going to give you guys another minute or two, and then, you know, as you get your account created, please say, you know, good or thumbs up, yes, or something in the chat. And we'll wait till we have, you know, 5 or 10 people.
Science is good.
Okay, so as you guys are finishing that up, do you have, okay, so we can go 2 ways here. I know you've been working with IIIF for most of the week, and you may have a IIIF manifest that's been published somewhere, either that you created yourself or one of the libraries or institutions you're affiliated with, or just one that you know and love because it's a piece of material that you know. You can go get that manifest link, or I have a couple of slides that walk you through finding one on one of our favorite special collection sites. So I'm gonna go ahead and walk through those slides, but if you want to go find your own manifest, that's totally cool too.
Does it work with, sorry, does it work with localhost? We've been using the localhost Google Chrome thing.
I do not think it will work with localhost because we'll be importing them into the server, into the FromThePage.com server, rather than into a browser-based thing like you'd have with Mirador. So it needs to be, the manifests need to be publicly available on the web.
Yeah, so the ones you've been working on this week probably don't work. So maybe pay attention to the next couple of slides, and we'll find you something else that will work.
Yes, good question. Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah. So we're going to, in fact, maybe we should go out and start pasting some links in. So this is the portal of the Texas history. We happen to live in Texas. This is a university in Texas, hosts a ton of special collections for lots of small organizations.
Sorry, I was going to go paste this into the chat.
Yeah, the URL for the portal. And we're gonna, we like, one of the things we like about the portal is that it has a very easy to find IIIF manifest link on their items, which is that next slide. What are you?
I'm trying to get the chat up and
where is the chat?
That's
You're
right.
just sliding through.
Sliding through, yes. Hello, Zoom. There we go. There. All right. Okay. So if you go to, I think it was this URL, texashistory.unt.edu.
Yeah.
And I'm going to, I think they can see, yeah, this is the same web browser, right? Yeah. So I'm going to look for something like diary. And here we go. This gives me a nice example of something that would be lovely to transcribe, which is just a painting diary.
If you scroll to the very bottom in the portal to Texas history, I love showing you this because this is, if you're building your own site that supports IIIF, I think this is so easy and obvious. And that's kind of a nice piece. It's at the bottom because not everybody needs to see it, but you come in here, you can hit copy. And then if you've created your From the Page account, you are probably at a start a new project page. So maybe
back to our screen.
Yeah, we can go back to our screen. Oh yeah.
So copying those, that gives you a IIIF manifest,
which you could paste into your browser if you want to look at it.
And then the next step is going to be to go back to From the Page and click on Dashboard, and then click Start a Project.
Let's go ahead and do that live, yeah.
So if I go to my dashboard, I can click Start a Project and then import a IIIF manifest or collection.
And then I just paste that manifest in. So this is a version 2 manifest, IIIF version 2. We don't support version 3 yet.
So at this point, I'm going to say that I want to, I just have a chance to review a little bit of this manifest to see, what the metadata says. And I'm going to create a new collection. I'm going to call it DHSI 2020 Van Brumfield, and create that collection. That's like my own little project. And then once I've done that, I'll select that collection and import the manifest into the collection. And that's going to churn for a while because the software has to read the manifest and then create parallel objects internally for its own bookkeeping for each one of the pages, or each one of the pages of a letter, or pages of the diary in this case. Perhaps I should have chosen a letter.
Letters go faster than
Yes,
diaries.
that's right.
So we don't pull in the images, obviously, because you've learned how the IIIF image API works. But we do pull in all of the structure about the document. So maybe if we can go to the chat, and as you have finished importing your manifest in, you can give us a thumbs up or a yes there. If you run into problems,
You can,
ask us questions there.
yes.
Or you can unmute yourself. We're happy. We're happy taking.
Error message using one of the Internet Archive's ones. Ah, that is an, okay, so that info.json, Sally, is a image API info, and so you're going to need a presentation API manifest.
So they have them.
Yeah, Internet Archive
Internet
does
has them.
have them. I'm not sure how to get them or how they expose them right now. Okay, so G is good. And we'll wait for a few other people to either ask questions or
Why don't you
indicate
paste
that they're
for
done.
Sally? Why don't you paste in the diary link that we just manifest link that we just used?
Sure. Better yet, why don't I find a letter?
Yes,
Here's the letter from Emma Davis. That's a nice short one.
Yeah, we'll put that in the chat for anyone else who wants to
That's
use
right.
that. You'll need to scroll to the bottom and find that IIIF link. And copy the manifest link.
Okay, and we're going to wait another couple of minutes. While we wait, we can see that my diary has finally finished importing, and I have a list of all of the pages along with a thumbnail. And the great thing about IIIF is that those thumbnails are fetched directly from the Portal to Texas History and their image servers. The same thing is true of all the pages.
Let's go ahead and click through one of the pages and show off everyone's favorite deep zoom in IIIF.
So this is OpenSeaDragon. And, you know, the thing that we love about OpenSeaDragon and about IIIF is that we can go really, really deep. We can see for difficult letters or things we're having trouble reading, cis-dasher, for example, right? We can just dive in there and get really high resolution of what has been uploaded.
Yeah, and from the page you can upload actual images. We'll take TIFFs and things, but we convert them to access copies that are not nearly this.
And while we do serve the
high
images
risk.
that are uploaded to us out via IIIF, we still have down converted them first. So if you have images on a IIIF image server, things are much better. Everyone's much happier if we can serve them directly this way. I'm going to take a look back in the chat again. Did I share a manifest?
Oh, just to
Oh,
Sally.
I'm sorry, just to Sally. Let me share that to everyone. Yeah, the Zoom chat sometimes sends you down.
So that's not a
Strange
manifest.
byways.
That is the page. You'll have
Right.
to click through to that page and then
Yes, you click
Scroll
through on this
down.
page, scroll down, and see at the very bottom right,
we can copy that. and
right
paste
by
it
this
in.
IIIF line. In fact, why don't we paste that manifest in as well?
So you guys can go ahead and finish importing a manifest, but we're going to keep moving. So we've kind of shown what it looks like once you bring the diary we're using as our example in. Next thing we wanted to do is kind of show what our transcription screen looks like. So because FromThePage is a crowdsourcing platform, we put a lot of work into making our user interface simple and hopefully obvious to the volunteers and
Other scholars, other collaborators, staff members, students.
but people who are going to be doing the transcription. So you have the image on the left, you can move it around, it can be on the right or on the top or on the bottom.
And switch to full screen. So this, you know, on the top is nice for getting a good
all the way across.
And we're going to go ahead and transcribe just a couple of lines from the first entry.
I would add April 25th.
You would add April 25th.
Oh. To admit, we did not pick a very good diary because it looks like
it looks like an address list.
Yes.
That's right. Okay, so we're just going to save that. And I think I want to pull myself out of full screen as well. Okay, so as we transcribed, you know, this gives us something that we can see as a transcription. And, you know, if we go back up to the full diary and look at the page that had image 30 in it, which I think was around the 6th page, you can see that we see our Mrs. J.W. Bradley. We can add to that. Things are not necessarily done quickly. We might want to revise as we go. We might want to review what we're doing. And what we try to do in that case is record everything that people are doing. So I'm going to add just one line. As we do that, one of the side effects of adding things is that we have stored a new version of each page. So we can see here the line that I just added in this version. If I go back a version, I can see that in my previous version, the previous time I saved, we only had one line.
So
maybe we should check and see if other people have also managed to transcribe pages as they go.
Okay, so maybe take a moment and transcribe some of one of your pages. If you want to paste your project link, what you see at the top of the screen, into the chat, other people could look at your project and transcribe a page or part of a page.
Yeah, I will do that with mine in case anyone else wants to transcribe addresses from
someplace in Texas, most likely. There's Glenn's.
Is that the wrong link though?
Yeah, that's the wrong link. It's a saved transcription link.
Yeah, maybe click on the Overview or Transcribe tab. One of the things that you'll notice as you're transcribing is that we're transcribing an entire page at a time. This is a little bit different from the kinds of annotations you probably saw earlier in the day, which typically are on regions of images. It's possible to have a web annotation or an open annotation that targets an entire canvas, which is what we're doing in this case, or even several canvases. So let's take a look at...
Let's do one of Glenn's because it's not the boring address diary.
Yes.
Okay, so you'll see that, first of all, you get a warning. This page is being edited by another user. So maybe if Glenn saves, or we go to the next page. There we go.
Next page, here we are.
Chief Constable's Office. Let's do that page. That looks like fun.
Save that.
So now Glenn will have more than one page done.
That's right, and hopefully, hopefully I spelled Aberystwyth right.
I was very impressed.
I was too.
I don't think I've ever tried saying it out loud, but I've definitely read it before. And let's look in the chat to see if there's any more questions. Okay. We've got Agnieszka. There we are. Ooh, she got a typewritten one. Nice. And Judita has, I think, the same diary that we were working with.
Totally fine, yes.
That's right. Valeria has the same old Blanche painting diary. All right, so we have quite a few. Are there any questions at this point about kind of what the user experience is like? You know, the act of importing, the act of bringing things in and starting the project, that's really something the project owner does. but the act of transcribing can be done by almost anyone, by whoever the project owner allows this to be done by.
So usually what we talk about next is transcription conventions. So if you scroll to the bottom of even this page, you'll see that every page when you're on the transcription screen has these transcription conventions in them. These are our defaults. They're not the best defaults. They were for like the very first project.
Very appropriate for our first project.
Yes. But if we go to one of the project that we own, that works. Or
the fact that we can change them?
Yes, the fact that we can change them, the settings.
Yeah, so I can change, let me go back to the one that we were in. Sorry, that's Glenn's. Right. Okay, so I can go up to this project that only has this one work that we brought in, and I can go to settings, and this is where I have control over all kinds of things, but one of the most important things that I have control over is the transcription conventions. And those transcription conventions are displayed at the bottom of the screen, right where a user may need them. This is the kind of activity, developing transcription conventions is an art in itself, and there's plenty of documentary editors and people in other forms of textual scholarship that have very strong opinions about this. But really the thing that we encourage people to do is to get one or more people together working on transcribing some of the material in your projects, and think about the questions that you ask yourself as you are transcribing things. And even something as simple as this diary that we ran into here, has lots of questions associated with it. How should you mark up January 15th as a header? How should you mark up some of these, right, some of these other things here, like an X, right? Or she means something by that, I'm not sure what, right?
So you can do a lot with these transcription conventions, and we have an example. So this is
a project at University College Dublin. This is a project John Howard ran that is transcribing a lot of material that's written in Irish Gaelic. And in addition to being in a language that's not English, or that a lot of modern people are unfamiliar with, is that Gaelic has its own script that is very unusual for a lot of speakers of modern Irish and modern English. So in addition to the transcription conventions that you've seen before, John Howard, the person running this project, has added all sorts of things about editorial comments, but also helpers on transcribing Gaelic script that include deep linked images that pull in examples of what this might be as it's transcribed. Nice little helpers on the alphabet and how to transliterate these letters that have dots over them into modern Roman script with PHs and SHs and THs and these things. So there's guidelines for essentially paleography and orthography all together that he's put with this particular project.
You can do a lot. A lot of people also, if you're working with characters that are not standard to your transcriber's keyboards, you can put example characters in these, and then they can copy and paste them into your transcription. There's lots of different things you can do here.
Take a look. So there's a question, how do you replicate the spelling in the transcript?
No, the spacing.
Spacing in the transcript. So there is a, so it looks like as we're transcribing, it looks like we are transcribing plain text. In fact, what we are writing is wiki text. We're using a markup language that is very similar to either Markdown or to the MediaWiki markup, and has elements brought from either of those. So the spaces, the carriage returns at the end of the line indicate a line break, and those will be word wrapped in cases where we might want to see the document all together. So here we have those word wrapped because they're part of the same stanza, but not because the ends of the lines are not meaningful outside of the context of the page. When we jump back into the page, we can see having new lines indicates paragraph breaks. We have a much longer section of markup of things that we handle. But generally speaking, we try to get end users to just handle the spacing like they'd like, as they see, as if they were doing a typewritten document. We do not handle all indentation. We don't handle all white spaces. In particular, we don't really handle horizontal white space that might indicate an indentation at the beginning of a paragraph, for example. Okay. Any other questions? No? All right. It was a good question, Valeria. Okay.
Privacy and restrictions.
Yes. So let's go back to our, is that in the slides as well? Yes, we should talk about transcription conventions, privacy and restrictions. Okay. Do you want to cover this? Okay,
I can, sure. So we have a lot of different ways to restrict or make private your projects. So these are actually 3 different screenshots from different layers of that. So an individual work, so what you imported when you imported that individual IIIF manifest is what we think of as a work, and then a group of works or one work can be part of a collection. So you can restrict an individual work so that it is visible to anyone, but can only be transcribed or edited by collaborators that you add. So that's kind of what we see on the left side. When you pop up to the collection level, then we give you a number of other controls. You can make your entire collection private. In fact, we'd like to ask you to do that now so you don't get random drive-by transcribers
Yes.
coming in to work on your import, the thing that you did just for this class. When you make your collection private, as you see on the far right side, you have the ability to add collection collaborators. So those collaborators can then see your collection and work on your collection as if it was public, but no one else can. It doesn't show up on our list of projects. It doesn't, it's not crawlable by web crawlers. It's as if it doesn't exist. When you have a public or a private project, you can add what we think of as secondary collection owners. So that's useful if you have, other staff members, or perhaps you're a librarian who's setting up a project for a class, but the professor who's teaching the class would like to get, the overnight emails that say, here's what happened on your collection last night or over the last day. Or maybe someone else would be adding material to this collection. Or someone else is developing your transcription conventions and they need access to those settings. So that's where you can kind of add a collection owner. So we do have API access, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. If your collection is public, then our IIIF API will publish it. It'll be available to anyone, right? If your collection is private, then we shut that off, and you have to come click this open API if you want to be able to.
If you want programmatic access to a private collection, which some projects do.
Right. We'll see if there's any questions about that, and then we're going to talk about research.
Are there questions on? Okay. More questions. Can you differentiate textual blocks or columns? So for textual blocks, most people differentiate that just by vertical white space and leaving empty spaces. For columns, and this shows up in a lot of the projects that are dealing with 2-column medieval manuscripts, it also shows up for more modern material in which images like the diary we were just looking at have been digitized with an entire opening. So there's really 2 pages that are being transcribed into 1 page. Most of the projects that we've worked with just have people transcribe those in reading order, leaving white space, blank lines between one column or another column. Some of them use editorial notes with single square braces to say left column, right column, or left page, right page as they go.
Is there any way to handle abbreviations and or mark expanded abbreviations?
I
can think of 2 different ways to do it off the top of my head.
Go for it. Yes.
So, part of this is your transcription conventions. You could choose to say, when you transcribe an abbreviation, you can follow it with a parenthesis that says expanded abbreviation and the expansion. Whatever you would choose to do that's along those lines. The other thing is, and we're not going into this today, but we're happy to go into it after this workshop or separately. We have a style of what we call subject linking, where you can apply wiki style links around certain words. And you can reference that verbatim text to a emergent vocabulary word that you have created that may be exactly that text or maybe a canonical version of that text.
Like a formal subject heading. One thing that I would encourage you to think of if you're running a project on any transcription platform is to be very careful about how you ask users to encode text in light of the purpose that you're going to put that text to. So if you are going to pull out the material via IIIF and put it someplace in a library system for full text search, if that library system can't handle XML markup or HTML markup or things like that, then it doesn't make sense to ask end users to do that. And this is true for things like special symbols. We ran into a case earlier this week of a library that was encoding old chemical texts. And people who are using that material nowadays are looking for modern chemical symbols, like Bi for bismuth. This was using the old alchemical symbols. And while there are Unicode versions of alchemy symbols, they're not what a modern researcher is looking for. So it makes sense to ask the transcribers to modernize the old alchemy symbols to modern chemical symbols like you might find on a periodical table. Okay, so in addition to public-facing crowdsourcing projects, it's also possible to use many of these crowdsourcing platforms, including FromThePage, for smaller projects. Fundamentally, crowdsourcing is about collaboration, but it's not the only kind of collaboration. So there are a number of projects that have been running that we've seen that use the platform for doing a research project. So you have a distributed group of scholarly editors, for example, who are editing a text in Old French. And here's an example. This top one is a set of legal codes from the Assizes of Jerusalem. So you have this Crusader era legal text. And there are a group of people, the French of Outremer, the French legal text working group at Fordham University, who transcribed these documents after importing them in IIIF, and then translated them. And they translated them as they were transcribing them. They'd go through a transcription as a pass of a page, and then they'd translate it as a page. And they would do it synchronously. They would do this using Google Hangouts at the time. You could use a Zoom meeting. And it was fascinating. We sat on a few of those sessions. It was fascinating to see them work. One person would type, the others would read and discuss, and usually one person was deputized to look up the Old French in a dictionary. Then they'd kind of all sign off, but many of them would keep working, and you could see that they would leave notes saying, oh, we have trouble with this phrase, what's going on? And then somebody else says, oh, well, we're going to keep this in the Old French rather than modernizing it. So it is possible to do these kinds of projects on a very, very large scale with thousands of contributors, or on a very small scale with only a classroom or perhaps only 3 or 4 scholars. In addition to transcription, we also support translation. This is developed by our friends at Fordham. Here's an example of a letter that has been transcribed. This is a letter from a French naval commander to George Washington during the American Revolution. After it's been transcribed, we can translate the letter from the source language into a target language. In this case, I'm translating it into English.
And you can swap back and forth between the transcription on the left, and there's that show image button that will take you back to the original image.
Right, and each of those will be exposed as separate IIIF annotations for that image, one for the translation and one for the transcription. Let me check to see if there have been any more questions. Can we index with a, oh wait, sorry, let me start at the top. So as well as free text, is there a way of marking up or labeling areas to be transcribed if you have forms or reports that are always structured the same way? Yes, there is. There's a totally separate part of FromThePage that is field-based transcription designed specifically for these kinds of forms and index cards.
Those projects.
Sure. Let me go get out of the presentation, and if I just take a look at the activity stream, those are very popular, and so we can see Here's an example from the Maryland State Archives of a project. And you can see that this is a very different kind of user interface. They have defined the specific fields that they want to collect, and they're asking volunteers to pull them in. And they've also added a controlled vocabulary for certain fields, like the month of the marriage, a year, or a county, which has to be a county in Maryland. So can we index with a controlled vocabulary? So in addition to this kind of drop-down controlled vocabulary, as Sarah mentioned, subject indexing within a text. And the answer to that is yes, you can define a set of subject headings, and then as people encounter them,
Look at
we can pull
NVCs.
them. Okay, yeah. Do
We have plenty of time, so.
Oh, we do? Okay.
Yes, so it is fine. We don't have MVC.
All right,
yet,
so
but,
let's pull up vertebrate zoology.
So we work with a kind of an emergent vocabulary. So as you tag things using the wiki tagging, then it becomes part of the subjects that we support and keep track of. We actually are building out for a documentary editing project the ability to pull in a names list, which is not exactly the same as like referencing the Library of Congress subject headings or anything, but it gives you a starting place. We don't know how it's going to end up working out for crowdsourcing projects, but for documentary editing and kind of research-based projects, it makes sense.
So here's an example of a ornithology notebook that has been transcribed by the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology at UC Berkeley. And they care a lot about the species that are mentioned within these documents, not just the birds, but also the vegetation, the trees and the other kinds of things that indicate the habitat that the birds are seen in. So if I see digger pine has been marked up, and it's been indexed, and we can read the 2 pages that mention a digger pine because they've been indexed. How that's done is done within the text using wiki links. So I can look here and see that digger pine has been surrounded with 2 square braces, which say this is a term to be indexed. Those can vary based on the text itself. So Grinnell, for example, is what we see in the text. Joseph Grinnell is the subject heading that it's to be indexed to. So let's see about other questions. Okay.
One of the cool things about this type of vocabulary where we keep track of the verbatim text and the canonical text is that in other pages that haven't had these subjects linked, you can actually go through and see that auto link button. We'll find one that we're more comfortable doing.
Yeah, so one of our own projects. So if we jump into a set of agricultural diaries and go into one of these books. So here's, this project has had some indexing done. And if I go to transcribe this document, you can see that a volunteer has done a great job transcribing it, but has not indexed. And if I auto link, that is going to look at all the markup that has previously been applied to this project and suggest new markup. So it suggested that I link plowing to the subject term plowing. It suggests that I link Jordan to Jordan, Meadsville to Meadsville, Virginia, Jerry, who is the diarist's son, to Jeremiah Hunt Graves. It's not perfect. Humans have to review it. There are cases in which definitely this gets some things wrong and I have to unlink things. But we do have the ability to kind of mine that to be able to use it for editorial consistency and a little bit of labor saving. Okay, other questions? Okay, let's get back into the discussion of getting data out, right? So IIIF is all about data interchange. It's all about pulling material in, pulling material out, being able to reuse digitized artifacts and scholarly contributions and annotations on those. So for our world, transcriptions and translations are annotations that have been created on top of these images. So how do we get them out? If I go and take a look at the document that I imported, which is
There.
There we go. Yes, right here. Okay, so if I go take a look where I was, the Blanche Perry painting diary, and I go up to the very top, I see my project configuration. There is a tab that says export. And the export screen lists all the works in this project. There's only one. And I have the ability to pull the whole thing out as HTML or plain text or TEI. But the most interesting for our purposes in our class is the IIIF. And this is a IIIF manifest that is created based on the originating manifest of the Portal of Texas History.
Make that a little bit bigger.
Yes, let's definitely make this larger. But it is something that is ready for us to import, right? So we can come down and we can see, well, this
You're
is—
You're going to hate
yes,
having
yes,
to remember what you transcribed.
No, I don't remember what page I transcribed, unfortunately. But we can take this manifest and import it into Mirador or the Universal Viewer or any other system. And we'd recommend Mirador because that does display annotations. And then we should be able to see the image served from the original Portal of Texas History.
So if you go back to like the third slide of our presentation.
And we can see that next to a transcript that's served out by FromThePage. So these examples are great examples of Mirador displaying images that are pulled in. This image is pulled in from Yale and being served to the user from Yale. This image is pulled in from the Bibliothèque Nationale de France and pulled in from there. So we're serving things from images from Connecticut and from Paris. And those are being served right next to transcripts that are pulled in from our crowdsourcing engine. We could then do on-screen annotations in Mirador and have those annotations stored in yet a third place, but presented next to the annotations that are pulled from FromThePage, for example. I mean, IIIF is so powerful. I just rave about it too much, I'm sorry.
So yeah, I think the next screenshot just shows an example of that IIIF API and kind of our documentation about it. We add a number of blocks to our IIIF API that let you figure out the status of your work. So if you look, we can't highlight that. I wonder if there's a pointer or something that we could use. There's a service block towards the bottom of the manifest on the screen that shows you percentage complete, percentage transcribed, OCR corrected, indexed, how many of them are marked blank. And so what we try to do is service the status of the document to whoever is writing a program against this, and so they can decide when they want to pull it in. We also have that same sort of status on a page-by-page basis. So some institutions like to pull in pages as soon as they're transcribed. Other people only want to pull in things when they're completely done, so they have a kind of a full set at a time. So we just try to surface all that and let you decide what you want. We also do some kind of cool things where you can like hand our API your IIIF manifest, and if we have a work that was imported from that IIIF manifest, we'll return our what we call a derivative manifest that has all of this data for that particular work. So, and we have, you know, I don't actually have the link in the slide anymore because I put the screenshot in, but we can get you a link if you're the sort of person who likes to do the programming and scripting to our documentation on how that works. So you should maybe go look at the export screen for your project that you were playing with, so you can kind of see that it shows you the status, shows you the IIIF manifest, see your IIIF manifest.
And then try to plug it into Mirador. We're very happy helping people do that.
Yep.
Maybe we should take a look. So people, you're welcome to unmute yourself and ask questions or make comments. Make suggestions.
We've got,
we have about 10 minutes for discussion and Q&A. So
you can do the next slide and we can stop sharing if you want. But one thing I did want to mention, so everything we're talking about today is very much the nuts and bolts of how you get things in and configure projects in FromThePage.
So they're focused on IIIF.
Right, IIIF is about the doing, right? Crowdsourcing is a lot about volunteers and motivation and all of this kind of squishy people stuff that isn't IIIF. So we actually have a webinar on July 6th that kind of covers that
finding
side of it.
volunteers,
Yeah.
motivating them, those kinds of things.
So, yeah.
Shall I stop sharing?
You can. Yeah, let's see if we have any other questions, or maybe look at the
Click
chat.
video.
Yeah, full video.
Where's
Okay.
the export function? Let me go back to sharing. All right, so if I go back to one of my projects, so here's this is sorry, this is Judy's project. This is let me see if I can find mine. Let me go.
You went to Diary of Jeremiah.
Oh, did I?
Is
Okay.
why you can't.
Right. This is not a bad example. So if you click the name of the project, which might be DHSI or 2021 or something, and let me make this a little smaller, and you click the Export tab at the top of there, then you should be able to see the IIIF link.
We also, if you scroll down to the very bottom of this page, we give you a link to the collection level manifest for this collection. And that's actually where you can find the link to the documentation and how we use that.
Right.
I think we had something else come in the chat. Whenever you get the chat up.
There we go. Thank you. Okay, great. Valeria was able to find it. All right.
Trying to think if there's anything else. There are more things you can do with From the Page. We support some Markdown that lets you do embedded tables for like really old historic account books. It's not easy. It's not something you would have to crowd do.
So Judita says that she started encoding a corpus of manuscripts by Leonardo da Vinci for an edition in TEI XML. So From the Page does produce, yes, From the Page produces TEI. So if I look at one of these, sure. Oh, well, there's no text for that.
2-pager.
There we go, 4-pager.
There's one. Four.
We can 4-page
Okay.
and see if that works. So even though this was encoded using these wiki links and some HTML markup, we can produce a P5 compliant TEI XML document from it. And there are a small handful of TEI projects that do their transcription from the page and then do a TEI export and then use Oxygen or some other editor to add things that we don't support, like markup for drama or markup for poetry, for example. So you can see the end user, in this case, transcribed July 1862 using a superscript, and we changed that to a TEI add tag for that export.
The subject links that we were showing earlier also can come out as part of the TEI export, and they are internal references to that we have entity IDs or ref IDs. I forget what the TEI tag is called.
Yeah, there's reference strings that point to those. Can we show something more about chemical symbols we mentioned? So my point with the chemical symbols, and we ran into this with a Museum of Vertebrate Zoology as well, is that you have to be very careful, especially if you're dealing with students or members of the public, to only ask them to encode things that you can support. A simple example of that is the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology. If I can find that example again. I will have to go find the example from the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology. Maybe I can just kind of describe this. But the Museum of Vertebrate Zoology has a lot of male or female symbols in their ornithology notes, as the naturalist would describe a bird and say, oh, this is male, this is female. We ran into a lot of troubles trying to make it easy for users to cut and paste male symbol or female symbols from Unicode into that, before we realized that the museum collection system we were bringing that into expected male and female to be marked using the words M-A-L-E or F-E-M-A-L-E. So all the symbols were not useful for that system.
Okay, but let's talk about, like, what are you thinking, Zendenko? Because I mean, any Unicode character can be part of your transcription. So we support, many different texts like, Arabic, Hebrew.
So we can see a set of documents in Arabic, but that is something that's designed to be ingested for an Arabic language project.
Right. We've also done some LaTeX extensions, and this is kind of getting way far afield, but for things like chemistry and logical notation,
mathematical formulae.
And what we actually end up doing there is you encode using a kind of a LaTeX tag, and then we convert it to a small image that's embedded in your transcription. The image doesn't come out in the web annotation that we have
Right.
for our IIIF exports.
So Judita has a question about would it be possible to work with both Mirador and TEI? We saw a lovely demo of that at the last IIIF community call. There is a group in Germany who are working on presenting TEI documents within Mirador itself.
Was that at the community call, or was that the manuscript
you're right,
session at the conference?
It was the manuscript session,
week?
yes, at last week's conference. What was the name of the, it started with an L. If you send us email, we can find the recording and send that to you and point you. But there are people working on a pane within Mirador that could present TEI. Most other TEI-based projects prefer to do their rendering into HTML using XSLT, and then those could just be presented as HTML as annotations by Mirador. And that seems, I'm not going to say more straightforward to do it that way, but because there's so much variation in how scholars want TEI to look, it seems like doing the conversion yourself and then presenting HTML may be a lot safer.
Okay, we're almost at the end of the hour. We're happy to stick around, show more things, answer more questions, but that is all we had prepared.
Yep.
Thank you both. That was really great. And so sorry again for missing the start. It was a great presentation. Thank you.
Valeria, unfortunately, the answer is no. We are no expert in MediaWiki. When we first started From the Page 15 years ago, we started trying to make image display work in MediaWiki, and we couldn't, and that's why we built this tool instead.